People moving out of Connecticut. It's a big issue this year. It's costing the state and you, the taxpayer, but how bad is it? Next on Face the State, the man with the numbers who is counting the cash, Revenue Services Commissioner Scott Jackson. Plus, the first debate with Lamont, Griebel, but no Stefanowski? Did the no-show hurt him? Who won? A candid take on the state of the race with Kevin Rennie of the Hartford Courant and Keith Phaneuf of the Connecticut Mirror. Plus, he washes the skyscrapers of Hartford, but his next task is even taller. We'll meet the man running against Senator Chris Murphy, businessman Matt Corey. It's all straight ahead this Sunday morning, September 9th, 2018.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, it's 8:30, and thanks for joining us for Face the State on this Sunday morning. I'm Dennis House. So what is the impact when someone moves out of Connecticut? Well, that person's money also moves out of Connecticut, and it is a big issue this year in the fall campaign. And with us today is the man who counts the money and keeps track of what's coming into the state coffers, is the Commissioner of Revenue Services, Scott Jackson. And Commissioner Jackson, good to see you here.
Good to be back.
So when I had your predecessor on here a while back, he said there was a downturn of about $250 million in income tax revenue. What is the situation now? Is it still going down?
It's pretty well stabilized right now, but the issue is with high income states like Connecticut is that individuals, a single person, could have a material effect on the total collections. So on any given day, those things can sway back and forth. Now we also have obviously the impact of the federal tax changes. On one side, we have a favorable Supreme Court ruling in the Wayfair case. On another side, so we believe right now that we can fairly effectively balance the ins and outs.
You said that one individual can really have an impact. We're talking about a wealthy person who moves out of the state.
Certainly.
Like a billionaire or something like that. How many of these wealthy people are we losing? I mean, some of the candidates will tell you they're all moving out.
They're not all moving out. One thing that we talk about a lot is we talk about cost. We don't necessarily talk about value. So what is the value of being in a state like Connecticut? What are the things that you and your family enjoy? The push-pull is not specifically a financial push-pull. We actually have a report. Whenever there is a single swing of $1 million one way or another, there's a report that's issued. And those reports swing both ways.
We also talked about that 6 month and a day phenomenon with Kevin Sullivan, your predecessor, last time he was here. And you have these people in Connecticut who are going to Florida. They're living there for 6 months and 1 day, and they can legally become a Florida resident, thereby, avoiding the taxes of our state. Is that still a problem?
It is a problem. Absolutely. I had an email exchange with a resident who just emailed me out of the blue on this. And, we kind of went back and forth on it. And I said, look, the reality is we have a couple of hundred auditors in our shop. You report that you stayed here for 3 months. What if you stayed here for 4 months? Do I send my auditors as PIs to follow you around? It would get to be a very big management problem. In fact, it's an issue that really requires a bit of federal intervention to level the playing field if, in fact, there was going to be action on that. Otherwise, what it would take for the Department of Revenue Services to manage a project of that size and scope, because we do have a long history here of spending time in warmer climates, although it's been pretty warm in Connecticut for the last few months. It reminds me of Miami here right now, but we would have to assign resources to that, and that's a big issue.
What do the auditors look for when they're investigating someone?
Oh, well, it could be anything, and so
they want to make sure that they're actually living in Florida, correct?
Certainly.
And how is that done?
But on the income tax side, it's a much smaller proportion, right? So where we really spend our time is the places where we know that there is high value, and the high value is actually not on the income tax side. It's on the corporate side, sales tax, items like that. So we know that's where we need to spend our time, and so that's where we do spend our time. What it's important to know for the residents and taxpayers of Connecticut is that you don't have DRS boogeymen in trees watching you and checking your airline stubs to see when you're coming and going. That's not the space in which we operate.
Last week we had two members of the Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth Commission here, and they were saying that only 58% of the sales tax revenue in our state is collected. 42% just is never collected. Why is that, and what can be done to get that money? Because we're talking billions of dollars over
right.
time.
There are a couple of things. There are some areas in which, some business areas in which we know there is a lack of compliance.
So restaurants or
right,
your businesses just aren't paying the tax?
Exactly. And I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone specifically, but I will tell you, restaurants, cash businesses, used car sales lots are frequently not compliant. And so, I'll give you an example. A business can go out and buy an illegal piece of software called suppression software, which takes a certain series of transactions out of the cash register. We know about it, and we know how to detect it. And so I would like to take this opportunity to let the businesses who may be engaging in this activity know that we know the digital footprints of suppression software, and we will find you.
Eventually. But you don't have the system yet. Right?
No. We have folks who are well trained in detecting this type of activity.
Let's talk about the income tax. Big deal this year. Everybody's talking about it. How much of the income to DRS is income tax?
About half of it.
About half of it. Mm-hmm. So when people say they want to eliminate the income tax,
$9 billion.
So if the income tax were wiped out instantly, what would that do?
It would mean immediately, without any other modifications, a reduction of $9 billion. Now, when the income tax was put in place, there was also a reduction on other taxes. I'm not here to opine on political matters. Our job at DRS is to take the political decisions and implement them. But it's always a lot more complicated to do than it is to say. And so we would need to hear a little bit more about all of the plans to determine how we would be able to effectively implement them.
You're the former mayor of Hamden, highly regarded there. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk a little bit of, political news. Last time we had you on this program, we talked about you as a potential candidate for governor someday. And as you know, there were some Democrats earlier this year who complained about the lack of diversity at the top of the ticket in the Democratic Party. There weren't enough minorities running for the higher offices. Why do you think that is? And the second part of that question is, would you be interested in running for governor someday?
You asked me that question, I think it was 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. I was sitting here, you were sitting there. And I said that I would not, and I did not. The circumstances for me have not changed. I still think that there is a toxicity in the atmosphere that I do not want to expose my family to. And so I will work very hard on the government side of the equation and try to steer clear of the political side of the equation. Why aren't there more candidates? A couple of things. One, so we have two parties, and I mean, in terms of registration, the unaffiliateds dwarf the parties, but we have two parties, and I'm not confident of the strategy on either side to effectively recruit and bring people up through the ranks. You mentioned that I was mayor. Before I was mayor, I was chief of staff to the mayor. Before I was chief of staff to the mayor, I was community development director for the town. And so by the time I walked through the door, by the time I knocked on my door, as a fairly young African-American man in a town that is predominantly white, which carries its own issues, I knew enough to make a credible play on the doors. A guy with few friends and no money was able to win a race. And it was because I had been allowed access to the system prior to trying to leap into an office of some size and scope. And creating the opportunity for folks to enter, for reaching out to them, to not shutting the door, not saying all the time, it's not your time, it's not your time. I think that's something that the parties need to take a closer look at doing.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. Scott Jackson, the Commissioner of Revenue Services. Best of luck with those income tax returns.
Thank you.
Coming in just a couple of months. When we come back, we will talk with Kevin Rennie and Keith Bannoff about the big debate this week. Who won? Was there a winner? And you can watch past editions of Face the State on our YouTube channel or on WFSB.com.